Welcome to the Truth Podcast. The intention of this show is to introduce you to incredible women who are committed to living their truth and purpose. They share practical guidance, tools, and wisdom that you can implement into your life today. I'm your host, Sarah McGann, and today I'm chatting with Isiah McKimmie. Isiah is a couples and sex therapist, sexologist, and Tantra teacher. As one of the most qualified sex and relationship experts in Australia, she has been supporting individuals and couples for over a decade. She brings together evidence-based psychotherapeutic practices with the sensual and spiritual teachings of Tantra. She believes it's important to encourage open conversations about sex and shares practical tools for relationships. And this is exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to open up this conversation. Welcome, Isiah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So lovely to be here.
So great to have you. I want to dive into it just straight away because you have a really, really interesting story. Being a sexologist and a Tantra teacher is kind of like the furthest thing that you thought you would ever do. In fact, you were a really shy country girl. So I would love to know, how did this purpose come about for you?
Yeah, it's amazing. It came completely by accident. It's the last thing I ever imagined myself doing. And honestly, I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a sexologist or sex therapist when I was making my career choices. So my first degree was in environment, and I really wanted to change the world and help people connect to the planet and do good in the world. That's what I thought my mission was. But as I got to the end of that degree, it just wasn't feeling like the right thing for me. It was kind of feeling overwhelming. It was feeling like something that wasn't going to fully satisfy me because I wasn't going to be able to make the changes that I wanted. And I had started practicing Tantra completely by accident in my last couple of years of university while I was finishing that degree. I'd kind of stumbled upon it at a music festival, and I don't think I even really knew what Tantra was, but I went along and I discovered very quickly, and I completely fell in love with it. So Tantra is, for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, is like an ancient form of yoga. It's a kind of meditation and yoga and a spiritual teaching. We seem to know it mostly in the West for the incredible benefits it has to our sex lives and also to our relationships. But there's so much more to it than that. Like any kind of yoga, there are so many more benefits, and there are these deeper spiritual teachings. And Tantra was really transforming my life at that time. It had helped me feel more connected to my body, to myself. I felt more centered and grounded within myself. I felt more confident. For the first time, I also felt like I had permission to enjoy sex. I'd had sex before and I'd enjoyed it, but I always felt like I was holding myself back, and I was struggling with the potential guilt and shame, and is it really okay to be enjoying myself, and is it okay to be exploring this? And Tantra gave me permission for that. So it felt like in so many ways becoming whole. And I was just wanting to share more and more of it. So I ended up becoming a teacher, still not thinking it would be a career for me. But not long after, I started teaching, and kind of coincidentally, not long after I finished my degree and kind of wondered, oh my gosh, what was I going to do with my life? A psychologist saw me teach Tantra and asked if I would work with his male clients experiencing sexual dysfunction. And that was a role that just kind of blew me away. It was so intimate and profound. And I really got to see just how much our sex lives and relationships impact our whole lives, and also how I could actually really make a difference to people's lives by helping them with sex and relationships. And I also kind of realized, oh my gosh, there's actually a career in this. This is actually work that people do. So from there, I went on to do a whole lot more study to make sure I really had the best tools and information and skills to be able to do that. And kind of one thing led to another. And at the end of that study, I was kind of a couples therapist, a sexologist, and a sex therapist. And I still sometimes look back and go, oh my God, wow, that was 7 years of study. Like, how did that even happen? But this does feel like my passion and my purpose now.
Great. So you mentioned a word there, and you mentioned the word shame, and I would really like to talk about this because from what I guess I've observed, as a society, we seem to have linked shame and sexual desire together. And there sort of seems to be two extremes where it's sort of all out in the open, or it's kind of hidden and we don't talk about it and we just brush it under the carpet. So why do you think this is? Why do you think we've made this connection? And how can we release shame so that we feel sexually empowered?
I feel like there's two really big questions there. And I think you're right. I think there is so much cultural shame and fear around sexuality and sexual desire. And gosh, where does that come from? We see it a lot in religion. We see it a lot in the patriarchal cultures. One of the most fascinating papers that I wrote during my time studying was around perceptions of women as either sexual beings or as good mothers, and the dichotomy that exists between kind of good women and women who are seen as sexual. And those perceptions, whether we agree with them or not, are so real for both men and women. We're really talking about that Madonna whore dichotomy that good girls don't do that. If we want to be good mothers, we can't be sexual. Women end up with so many more labels for being sexually open than men do: slut, whore, tart. And that impacts our psyche. Conversely, I think one of the ways that people end up dealing with that is by going to the I don't care, I'm just going to be sexually open, I'm going to do everything I want. Or they kind of objectify sex and their partners, which is often a way of coping with the shame. So all of these messages, all of these cultural messages that we've been getting for, hundreds, even thousands of years actually, impact our sense of fear and shame around sex. And so how do we let that go? I love that question. And I wish there was a really simple way to answer it, but for me, it's been a journey, and I still feel shame and fear around sex. Sometimes I still notice it coming up and impacting how I might be sexually with a partner. I think by acknowledging that it's there and being really gentle on ourselves around it is such an important first step. It's really easy to see other people or other women who are really sexually open and kind of give ourselves a hard time for, I should just be able to let go. I should just, be able to explore and express myself. But actually just acknowledging those different things we might have taken on, the different messages that have come in from our culture, our family, and religion, can be a really important start. Starting to look at some of the beliefs that are there. Oh my gosh, if I'm overly sexual, I might not be loved, or sex should be about pleasing my partner, all of these unconscious beliefs that hide underneath, if we start looking at those, it's almost like they start to kind of lose their grip on us. And I don't know if you've had that experience. Like once you see a belief or a message you've taken on, it's like, oh, that actually, that's not such a big deal. It doesn't impact me in the same way anymore. And then we start letting go of shame by doing things step by step. So one of the antidotes to shame is connection, being in connection and being accepted. And so if we can kind of push those edges of what feels uncomfortable or what potentially feels shameful and realize like, oh my God, I'm okay in this. I'm still accepted. I'm still loved. My partner still desires me and is attracted to me and loves me. Then we can keep taking those steps until we find, suppose like I did, that I was showing up in an entirely different way sexually. I wasn't holding myself back anymore. I was fully letting myself follow pleasure and explore pleasure and express that and voice what felt good for me and voice what I wanted.
Yeah, I love this idea about pleasure as well. You speak about it a lot in your ebook, Liberated, and really giving ourselves that, I guess, the permission to experience pleasure, not just sexually, but like how much pleasure are we willing to just allow ourselves to have in everyday life. And that was when I read your book, I was like, yeah, wow, I'd never really thought of it that way before, that idea of I can give myself the permission to experience pleasure in so many ways. And I think the other thing around pleasure is actually being mindful in the moment of pleasure. Yes. Because we can get so busy and we do things and we're not, like, I guess, aware or mindful. So it might be a pleasurable experience, but we might not be present with that pleasurable experience either. And I know that you talk about this as well, like especially, women during sex and start thinking about hanging out the laundry or something or doing the dishes.
I know. It's true that I work a lot with women about getting out of their heads and coming back to their bodies so that they can listen to what would give their bodies pleasure and not just be thinking or not be stuck in the to-do lists. And and then for some women, sex becomes another to-do list because they're in that frame of mind, that task oriented, and okay, I've got to get that done for my partner, and we lose the pleasure and the juice and the connection in that.
Yeah.
I was working with a couple yesterday who've kind of lost, they've lost some of that spark in their sex life, and one of them in particular just doesn't have a lot of interest for sex, but it's really becoming a wedge, like for so many couples I work with in their relationship, because they do both recognize it as something that, that brings them together, something that helps them feel loved and connected and desired by each other. And we were starting with just a small kind of touch exercise. I always like to take people through things, step by step in ways that feel comfortable. So we were practicing just touch on the hand and arm. And I had them answer the question to each other, how would I most like to be touched right now? And it was such it can sound like such a simple question, but it was one they're like, gosh, we never actually stop and think about that. How would I really like to be touched right now? We so often just go along with what our partner is doing to us or for us, or how can I please them? But to really answer that question, what would I like? What would bring me the most pleasure now? How would I like to be touched? Is such an empowering one. And I loved watching them explore that together and kind of realize the power of that question and what a gift it was to each other to answer that to each other.
Yeah. And so that is something, say there is a couple listening to this and maybe they have lost that sexual desire for one another. They've had kids, they've got jobs, they're busy. This is a great, I guess, exercise that they could do together to kind of re-spark that sexual desire between them. Yeah,
it is. So it's actually the most common reason that people come to me as a couples therapist and sexologist. They've lost their desire, they've lost their spark, and they want to get it back. They don't just want to be housemates or really good friends, or they want to be lovers again. They want that playfulness and the connection that comes through sexual intimacy. So one of the first things that I say to people who are struggling around this is, I guess the first step really is to have it be a priority. It's like, we know through research that there are two really important things that contribute to having a lasting, passionate, loving relationship. One is staying good friends, which a lot of couples, they've got that part really well. The other is making sex a priority. It's like, it doesn't just happen on its own. We have to really see it as important and continue to give it attention, continue to explore it, and continue to give time to it. And that's often a big mindset shift to what I hear a lot of women particularly who come to therapy say is, I don't care if I never had sex again. I wish we didn't have to. I'm so tired. But actually to see it as something that's important is a mindset shift that can make such a big difference. And then for couples, working on their connection outside the bedroom, like doing things together as lovers, going on dates, having some fun, connecting just the two of you, even looking at each other in the eyes where you're not being interrupted by kids, where you're not cooking dinner, where you're not doing the dishes, where you're not watching television. There's such powerful connection that can come from that. And that forms really such an important foundation for then going ahead and getting the spark back in the bedroom. And absolutely starting with those small touch exercises, slowly getting your physical connection back, exploring your sensual connection together can help to kind of propel you in that direction of feeling that spark and intimacy again.
Yeah, that's all such great advice. So I would also like to ask about specifically a question around woman and pleasure. And so say maybe part of the reason a woman has lost desire from her partner is that she struggles to experience pleasure, potentially struggles to even experience an orgasm, because is it around 30% of women? I'm not sure of the exact statistics. I'm sure you can tell us. But what would your advice be to a woman who does struggle with pleasure, who does struggle with reaching orgasm?
Yeah, great question. And it is, so it's 30% of women struggle to reach orgasm. 10%, so 1 in 10 sexually active women have never had an orgasm at all. And in heterosexual sexual encounters, men are twice as likely to reach orgasm as women. So, of course, we don't need to have an orgasm every time we have sex for it to be satisfying and loving and really enjoyable. But if we want to and we can't, or we're consistently not having orgasms, we kind of loses it's like, what's in it for me? But I'm not getting all the pleasure I can out of this. So one of the major things for women, particularly during heterosexual sex, is lack of adequate foreplay. So women need really at least 15 to 20 minutes of foreplay for their bodies to fully prepare for sex. And sure, there are times that we can have quickies, but there's often been like a lot of build up before that happens. So we're already feeling really turned on and aroused when that happens. If we're starting from zero, we need that time for our body to lubricate, for the muscles that hold the uterus in place to contract so we don't end up feeling pain, for the vaginal canal to do what's called tenting, where again that opens and expands so that we're not creating friction or pain, and all of those changes take time. And so often, when we're busy or we're wanting to have sex to please our partner, that's something that gets forgotten. It's like, oh, let's just get to the main event. Let's get to the point here. And foreplay gets skipped, but in that, women are more likely to feel pain. They're less likely to feel their full pleasure, and they're also less likely to orgasm. So that is a really important piece that can make such a difference for so many women anyway. I think, that piece around pleasure is really important, giving ourselves permission to feel pleasure. And I sometimes describe pleasure as like a muscle that we have to learn to stretch. We've often kind of trained ourselves or been trained by society to not feel very much pleasure. It's like, oh, that's something we should feel guilty about. That's something that's for other people or other women, or, I'm too busy to feel pleasure. And we miss out on that. And so it's like this muscle that we have to learn to stretch. And certainly with Tantra, that's a big part of what we end up doing in Tantra, so that we're actually completely heightening the level of orgasm we can have. We have orgasms that can last up to 15 minutes rather than a few seconds, orgasms that go through our whole body in waves, just more powerful orgasms, more potent orgasms, multiple orgasms, and men can have multiple orgasms with Tantra as well. So a really big part of that is learning to feel more pleasure, giving ourselves permission for it, and practicing taking our time with it instead of getting everything over with really quickly. For women, who are struggling to reach orgasm ever, there's a whole lot of other things that they can look at too around, beliefs that might be holding them back. We talked about fear and shame earlier, beliefs that they might have taken on, the way that they're able to communicate with their partner, also how they touch themselves, and can they have an orgasm by themselves, which some women can, but then struggle to have an orgasm with a partner. So learning different ways of touching themselves so they can have an orgasm, finding different ways of experiencing pleasure, learning to communicate to a partner what it is that really brings them pleasure. And there's often some experimenting and practice that goes on in there. So I'm writing a book about orgasm at the moment, which I'm super excited to share, because these are questions that I get asked so often. And I love when, I'm working with a woman who's never had an orgasm and she has an orgasm for the first time. I think I can say that that's truly one of the most rewarding parts of my work. It's such an amazing gift for a woman to have.
And I've actually seen you have a couple of courses, don't you? Online courses. So woman for woman. So if a woman was struggling to reach orgasm or to experience pleasure, she could go online, and they're really reasonable too. Like, I was like, wow, I think I should do that course.
I do. I have a couple of programs for women and one for couples that we've just finished as well, like helping them explore together, giving the skills to talk about sex in a way that's really comfortable, lots of fun exercises in there as well. So yeah, one for couples and a couple for women.
Great. And I think the thing that has come up kind of as you've been speaking as well it's been this idea of creating time for ourselves. And this is the number one thing. It's like with like with my clients, who their spiritual practice or their daily rituals are not non-negotiable for them yet. And the biggest block to that is time. It's like, I don't have time, I'm too busy. And we live in this world where everyone wants everything yesterday. It's all kind of about instant gratification, and we kind of live in this low level state of stress. And I guess, like talking about stress for a moment, I guess, like sex is a really, or even self-pleasure is a great way to release stress as well. So really learning to make the time to have that self-pleasure or to have that kind of connection, and just to slow down.
Yeah, it's true. So stress is really bad for our sex lives because it's really hard to feel turned on when we're in that low-level fear state, which is what, low-level stress or anxiety is. And it does impact on our sexual function. But then sex is really great for stress, whether it be self-pleasure or sex with someone else. It helps us release so many feel-good hormones and endorphins. It helps relax us. And actually, this is one that I love to share with women who are like, oh, I'm so busy, I've got to get so much done. There was a study released actually not that long ago that showed people who have sex the night before are actually more productive at work the next day. So if you want to get more done at work the next day, engage in some love and some sexy time the night before, because that boost to our mood and to our thinking actually helps productivity as well.
Okay, that's great. So everyone should just have sex every night. I think is the key message.
Maybe not every night.
Okay, so what I would love, I'm really interested in this next question, for myself, but I also think a lot of people will be interested in this is, we know that sexual energy it's one of the most powerful energies on the planet, especially when we use it in a really mindful way. So how can we intentionally channel sexual energy in the manifestation process and in the creation process and even in creativity?
Good question. Another really big question there. Because there are different ways that we can do this, and Tantra has a whole lot of different exercises and tools that help us do this. One of the ways that I explain it in its most simple form is, okay, so as you said, sexual energy, it is energy. It's actually life force energy. And as long as we're shutting down sexual energy, we're shutting down life force energy. We can actually kind of open ourselves and open up to our sexual energy, like allow it to, to move through us and to kind of charge through our body and energize our body, even just as we're going about our day. That's going to infuse into everything that we do, and we're going to have more of that energy coming through us. So, in its really most simple form, just to allow that energy to really connect with that energy is going to start to make a difference. Sexual energy and expression are so connected as well. So often when we're allowing that sexual energy or the sensuality, it's expressing in the world in various ways, like through, and that's not to be just putting out sexual energy. It's like it's coming through in the words we're writing, the energy of the projects that we're creating, what it is that we're saying on the deepest levels. So to start to allow and embrace that energy, for me, is like one of the simplest first steps, if you like. We can also, at the point of orgasm, focus on a particular outcome that we might want. Or even another one for people who are creative is to really connect with your body and your sexual energy. Get the whole body moving, get the pelvis moving, bring your awareness down into the body, into the pelvis before you start writing or before you start creating, before you start working on something in your business, and see what difference that makes.
They are such great ideas. I haven't thought of them before, so I'm definitely going to use them. But one thing that that you said was, at the peak of orgasm, it's like, okay, something you want to focus on. So it's like having a clear intention. So whatever that is, whether it's at work or whatever, having that clear intention, and then you're actually matching it with elevated emotions at that point.
Yes.
And that is actually they are the two components that cause manifestation, or cause creation in our life, because intention alone doesn't, elevated emotion alone doesn't. It really is those two pieces. I think that's super exciting that we can use it in that way. So that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I also just wanted to ask you, I mean, you've spoken a lot about, getting into the body. And the body is where, and our feeling state is where our intuition lies. Is there a connection between sex and our intuition?
That's a really good question. I've never quite had it framed that way before, but for me, in that connecting to the body, that is part of where my intuition lies, of listening to those subtle nuances, the subtle reactions of my body, and actually to the emotion that goes with that as well. So if I'm feeling like a really slight tension in my stomach, that's probably some kind of fear or anxiety. And if I can tune into that and kind of breathe into it and allow it to be there instead of moving away from it, then I have a deeper sense of, is this a fear that I need to be listening to? Am I contracting because this isn't right? Or am I just contracting because this is fear? So actually, by tuning in to those subtle sensations, I'm more easily able to discern between intuition and fear, and listen to more of that intuition overall.
Yeah, that's great. It really is that embodied process, isn't it?
Yeah, yes.
So I'm really interested in women who live their truth, who are true to their purpose, who show up in the world every day and do it. Just be their truth. I would love to know, like, for you personally, because this topic that you talk about, has a lot of misconceptions, there's taboo around it. What does it take for you to show up every day in your truth, in your purpose, and be vulnerable? Because you are so vulnerable. I mean, we even spoke after I read your ebook, Liberated. I sent you that message. And you're like, oh my God, I've got such a vulnerability hangover, and this is one of the biggest things that stop people from stepping into their purpose, into their truth, is that, that vulnerability of being seen by other people. So what does it take? And do you have any practical kind of tools or practices that people could implement so that they can, really show up in their vulnerability and their truth and their purpose?
And this is something that I have constantly journeyed with since I really started doing this work around sexuality, because I have also ended up with a lot of criticism, or have kind of been somewhat shunned sometimes for showing up and talking about this work. It's really difficult for people working in the field of sexuality to promote their work on social media. We get Instagram posts taken down all the time, and people often just don't understand it, and I can have people whose own shame and fear kind of gets reflected, and and I kind of get that judgment. So for me, there's me showing up in my truth every day, which is about me being firstly really aware, that self-awareness of my own emotions, that checking in with my body, my emotions, what's going on, being willing to voice that truthfully and vulnerably to the people close to me, not in a space of blame, not in a space of, of disconnection or pretending it isn't there, but to really kind of show up vulnerably. This is who I am. This is what's going on for me at the moment. And there's still some discernment for me about what gets shared publicly. I will share really vulnerably and really truthfully when I feel like it's going to serve my clients, when I feel like it's going to serve my tribe on Instagram, on Facebook, on social media. And we'll write ebooks or articles that are quite vulnerable in that sense, but there's also a discernment from me. So showing up and living in my truth doesn't necessarily mean that I'm blurting my truth out everywhere or having to share every single thing publicly. There's actually a discernment for me around that. And I think in a broader kind of perspective, what being in my truth means is I'm continuing to do this work regardless of how it might be perceived, regardless of what some people might. This is how I know I can make a difference to people's lives, and it's my truth to keep showing up and sharing it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that idea of discernment, actually, that we can share really openly, but we don't need to share everything. And the other word you used in there was judgment. I think the thing is, when we get on the field, we are going to be judged. That it's not, we are going to receive some kind of projection of judgment, no matter what field you are in, right? But it's not about whether or not you get judged. It's about whether or not you are willing to get on the field and play full out.
Yes.
Independent of what anyone else thinks. And I think, yes, it can be terrifying, that idea of, oh my God, and I struggle with it as well. Personally, it's a big journey for me too. But at the end of my life, there's only one question I'm going to ask myself, and that is, did I get on the field or did I sit on the sidelines? And what would be more terrifying? So I think that's a really powerful one too.
Absolutely. And I love that if we get on the field, we are going to get judgment, but yeah, it is the most important thing at the end of the day. And I think, it's helpful for me particularly to keep in mind that if other people are judging me, it's so much more about them than it is about me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always so key to remember. So I would love to know can you share how people can connect with you? What's the best way for people to do that?
Yes, so if you go to my website, www.isiah-mckimmie.com, there's a lot of free resources on there. So you can listen to my podcast, read my blogs, download my ebooks. There are a lot of resources there. I love people connecting with me on Instagram's kind of my new favorite. Love Instagram. I also have a Facebook group, Wholehearted. And as you mentioned, Sarah, I have some online programs, and I also do coaching via Skype, so I can connect with people anywhere in the world if they're looking for coaching or therapy around relationships and sex.
Great. And what I do love about your website is you do have so much amazing content on there that is completely free. Like, you're so generous with your knowledge. I've gotten so much out of listening to your podcast, reading your ebooks, reading some of your blogs. It's been really great. So it's such a great resource. So anyone, if there are any kind of topics that we've spoken about today, guaranteed there's something on your website that covers this topic. So thank you so much. It has been enlightening. It has been interesting. It's been entertaining. I've just had an absolute ball chatting to you today. So thank you as well for just giving your time so generously.
Oh, likewise. It's been so lovely to chat. Thank you so much for having me, Sarah, and thank you to everyone listening as well.
Yeah. Thank you, gorgeous. Have a great day.
Thank you.